So whereas in the last lecture we talked about the support system, the different support cells of the central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, in this lecture we're going to talk about the absolute star, neurons. Neurons are the cells that pretty much everybody understands deal with the nervous system. This is what, when you think of the nervous system, you think of a neuron. They are very small compared to the glial cells that surround them, compared to all those support cells. They're not the biggest cells out there, but they are vitally important, because these guys are capable of sending electric signals and chemical signals. An electrical signal will travel extremely quickly through the body, faster than a chemical signal will. It's down these long, meandering tracks of the neuron that you're able to send a signal. They are very specialized and they have different lengths. Some neurons will run the entire length of your leg. They branch off of your spinal cord and they go straight down your leg. That's how long they are. One cell, all that length. They're also the longest lived cells in your body. Your neurons live for as long as you do. So they can, you have to take care of them. If you kill your brain cells, they're not really coming back unless you have some access to very specialized neurobiology. Sometimes. Neurons do not reproduce mitotically. They don't reproduce themselves. When they're gone, they're gone. They are amitotic. They're irreplaceable safely with current technology. They have a very, very high metabolism. 25% of the calories you consume, 25% of all the nutrients you take in have to go to your neural cells, the neurons in your brain. You are working really hard to feed this beast. All neurons have a similar basic structure, but then they become specialized with the way these structures branch off each other. They have a cell body. That's called the soma. This body acts like any other cell. It's got a nucleus in it. It's got life support. It's producing proteins. So it's like a typical cell, the body. Branching off of that, you have dendrites. The dendrites are these small projections that are out to pick up signals from around it. Signal receipt. So off the soma, you'll have dendrites that pull in signals. And then coming off usually one end, you'll have axons. Axons are going to transmit electrical signals away from the cell body. Dendrites pull in a signal, the cell body processes it, the axon takes a signal away from the cell. That's the basic structure of the neuron. 3 parts: cell body, dendrite, axon. Neurons tend to get classified by the number of projections they have, processes. So think of the neurites, how many axons they have, how many dendrites they have. Most have at least 1 axon and at least 2 dendrites. But based on their location and what they do, they may have different numbers. For example, here's a multipolar neuron. These have more than 2 neurites extending from the cell body, including the axon. So you've got dendrites surrounding. What's the role of the dendrite? They pick up signals. The axon then can transmit them. It might be bipolar, where you have an axon and a dendrite, and they extend in to opposite sides, and that makes 2 poles. So the axon receives information, the dendrite receives information, and then it's passed down to the, along the axon. With unipolar, there's only one process extending from the cell body. This is typically found in sensory receptors. Sensory neurons are unipolar. They move information one way. They're moving the information from the sense to the brain. Does that make sense? So they take in information from one side, they send information out the other. Motor neurons are different. They've got to be multipolar, because not only do they have to receive information on both ends, they have to transmit information. So information is, you get information from a sense, back to sticking your hand on a hot stove. You get a sense, it hits your hand, your senses, touch. That's going to go both to your muscle and your brain at the same time. It's not like it goes to your brain, gets processed, then sent back to your muscle. Two things happening at once. So you need multipolar. Bipolar neurons are used in the senses. These are the ones that have a dendrite on one end, an axon on the other. The dendrite takes in information, like from your eye, because you're not sending information back out through your eye. It's not like you've got laser, maybe you got laser beams, that'd be cool. You can't shoot beams out of your eyes. You just take in information, that information then travels directly to your brain in one direction, where it gets processed. It does not go back out to the organ. Interneurons, right here, they're going to be termed multipolar, because they're going to transmit information between sensory neurons and motor neurons. It's almost like a switch track. You're going to move a signal in two directions. So sensation can be found at the unipolar sensory neuron. Olfactory, olfaction. You take it, you smell something. You've got a lot of cells there that are then able to transmit that information directly to your brain in one direction. So that information gets transmitted up the axon. And the axon in this peripheral nervous system is wrapped up by Schwann cells. So you're able to hold that electrical signal on the inside, transmitting it straight. It's transmitting it fast. The information gets passed through multipolar interneurons back to the spinal cord. So the ones that branch off, you go from tip of your finger, or in this case, the tip of, I don't know if that's a sloth. I have no idea what that is. You're moving sensation from the pad back to the central, to the spinal cord part of the central nervous system along the axon. When you get to the spinal cord, the central nervous system, it can split. It can either travel to the brain for recognition, ow, this hurts, or it can go back out and say, pull my hand away. Or, surprisingly enough, it could do both because it can split. So if it's sent back to the muscles, it doesn't, it goes up to the brain slower, but it goes out to the muscles. That's where you have your involuntary responses. Pull my hand away from fire. You can overrule those. You may not want to, but you can. Your brain can say, put my hand in fire, because your brain isn't the smartest sometimes. When the signal gets to your brain, it's processed and a conscious decision can be made. Do I want to put my hand in this fire? What can that do for me? Will it make me look super cool? I better do it then. Because that's the way the brain works. The resultant decision then gets processed and sent back down your neurons, back out to the muscles, where a conscious change will happen. So if you put your hand near a fire and you pull it away, your first reaction is pull it away, because your muscles will involuntarily do that. But after it's processed by your brain can be like, nah, put it back. The motor neurons pick up the message, send the signal to the cells, and now we have a conscious reaction happening, as far as we know what consciousness is. So here's the deal. We understand absolutely how all the parts work. We understand how signals get sent up the neurons and down the neurons, how the signal hits our brain and what our brain does. The problem is we don't understand where that consciousness comes from. We have no idea. We understand the individual components, but in this case, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. We know what makes your hand jerk away, but we don't know what makes you you. That's really weird. So here's the deal. If a dendrite, a single dendrite, was the length of a football field, it would take 1 second to send a signal from one end all the way to the other. And I'm not talking 100 yards. I'm talking from outside the field to the other end of outside the field. 1 second.